Hi guys, I'm Ina from Sewing Machine, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to sew Franz shirt. It's an oversized basic that comes in two different bodice lengths, regular and cropped. I'm wearing cropped in all my samples, and also you can choose between three different sleeve options. Short, this is regular long, and also there is a balloon sleeve option. The pattern is very beginner friendly. I'm using mainly my serger but also my regular sewing machine. If you don't have a serger, you can just sew it with a regular sewing machine as well and set it to a small zigzag stitch. You will need any kind of knit fabric like jersey, French terry or similar. It doesn't matter what composition it has. Optional, you will need twin needle for the hem and also optional elastic if you are going to sew the balloon sleeve version. The detailed measurements can be found in the written instructions as well as in the article photos. Here is an overview of all the pattern pieces that you will need. All seam allowances are already included, so you can cut straight away. At the neckband pattern piece, you will find three lines. The shortest one is for neck ribbing, the second one is for very stretchy knit fabrics like viscose jersey, and the last line is for less stretchy fabrics like cotton. My fabric here is very stretchy, that's why I'm using the second line, and I will place it on the fold, or you can just fold away the parts that you don't need and cut it out on the fold. Make sure to transfer all the markings to the fabric with a little notch or tailor's chalk, and I also mark the center front at the neck and the center back at the back neck. And last but not least, I'm marking the center of my neckband piece. Next, I'm going to grab front and back piece and I will brace them with right sides together and I will pin across the shoulders. Stitch with 1 centimeter seam allowance. I'm using my serger. If you don't have one, you can use a small zigzag stitch as well. This is what it should look like. And next we're going to sew the sleeves in, and therefore I will open the shirt up flat and I will pin the sleeve into the armhole with right sides together. At the sleeve head there is a marking that matches up with the shoulder seam, and at the armhole front is a marking which will match up with the front marking at the sleeve. At the armpit points, the sleeve should overlap by 1 centimeter, and that is what it should look like. This is what it should look like now, and now I'm going to sew the sleeves into the armhole with my regular 1 centimeter seam allowance. This is what it should look like now, and now we're going to sew the sides, and I will place the shirt so that right sides are together, and I will match up the armhole seams, and I will pin along the whole sides, starting at the sleeve hem down to the bodice hem. Pin at both side seams. And then stitch the sleeve and side seam in one go. I'm using my serger with 1 centimeter seam allowance, but a small zigzag stitch is also totally fine. This is the final side seam, and now we're going to sew the neckband. Fold it with right sides together so that the short edges are together and pin. Then stitch with 1 centimeter seam allowance. And now I'm going to divide it into quarters by placing the front marking on the seam, and this way I can clip little notches at the quarters. Now I will do the same thing at the neck, and I am placing the front and back center markings, and I will pin them together, and this way I can easily mark the quarters at the neck as well. Then I will fold my neckband lengthwise so that wrong sides are together and right sides are facing out, and the raw edges are together as well, and I'm pinning it roughly in place. Now I'm gonna pin the neckband with right sides together to the neck, and I will match up the quarter markings, and the seam of the neckband will match up with the center back marking. And here you can see that the neckband is shorter than the neck, which is normal. So just pull and pin it in place. If you feel like you have to stretch or pull like crazy to match the neckband the neck, then it's probably too short. And if you feel like you don't have to stretch at all, it's probably too long. This is what it should look like now. And now I'm gonna sew with 1 centimeter seam allowance. And as I go, I will stretch the neckband tight so that it matches the neck. And I'm sewing all the way around. If you want, you can now top stitch the seam allowance to the neck bodice all the way around with a twin needle or a small zigzag stitch, and I'm sewing a presser foot with a presser foot distance to the seam. Last but not least, give it a good press. Next, we're gonna hem, and therefore I will fold 2 centimeters of the bodice hem to the inside, and I'm pinning it in place. I'm gonna pin from the outside as I will sew from the outside later. I'm gonna do the same thing at the sleeve hem, fold it 2 centimeters to the inside and pin it in place. This step is always the same no matter which sleeve option you're going to sew. Now I'm gonna hem the bodice by sewing all the way around with a seam allowance of 1.5 centimeters. I'm using my twin needle, and I'm setting the upper thread to a high setting like 8 or 9. And but you can also use a small zigzag stitch or your cover lock. This is the final bodice hem. Now I'm gonna hem the sleeve. If you're going to sew the balloon sleeve version, please go to the next chapter. And for the other two sleeve options, I'm gonna stitch all the way around with my twin needle and a seam allowance of 1.5 centimeters. For the balloon sleeves, please fold the hem 2 centimeters to the inside and pin in place if you haven't done that yet. And then I'm gonna hem it with 1.5 centimeter seam allowance with my twin needle, a zigzag stitch or similar. And the special thing here is to leave a little gap of 1 centimeter at the sleeve seam. Here you can see the little gap. And now I'm gonna install a safety pin at the end of my elastic. You can find the finished measurements of the elastic in the written instructions, but you can also just wrap a piece of elastic around your wrist and add 1 centimeter seam allowance. And now I'm pulling it into the sleeve hem, and I will secure the other end of the elastic with some pins so that it doesn't slip through. Then I will overlap the ends by 1 centimeter and I will pin them in place. And then I will stitch the elastic ends together with a big zigzag stitch. This is the end of the tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it and that it was helpful. If you have any questions or feedback, feel free to leave a comment or reach out on Instagram. If you're sharing your make on social media, make sure to use the hashtag #SewingMachineFranz so that others and me can find it easily.